here on the Action Network's YouTube page and the Action Network Twitter. I'm here to tell you that the Bet What Happens Live is presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey, Colorado, and Ohio. Bet $1, get 200 free. I am BJ Cunningham, joined by my friend and colleague, Mike Calabrese. We're nearing close to the end of halftime here. We got a minute 35. Georgia's up 24-7 in second and 3. Georgia's knocking right on the doorstep once again. Been a very dominant performance so far from Georgia. They're playing just like the big favorites they were coming into this game. But first, I'm kicking to you, Mike. What are your thoughts here on what we've seen so far here in the first half, and anything might potentially be playing live here as we go forward?
So, I mean, I've been searching just like any fan at this point for signs of life from TCU. And what's interesting is that they had the most success with their offense running the football, which I thought that they would just abandon the run from the get-go, given the fact that Georgia led the country in run defense this year. And not just in terms of, shutting down teams in terms of yards per carry, but also just taking away even any of the gadget plays, the jet sweeps, other than the run to Duggan, really. They just haven't been able to put the fear of God into this Georgia defense at all. But what has surprised me is that the Georgia defense was much maligned after that Ohio State performance. Marvin Harrison ate him up, was running wild in their secondary. And not only have they shut down the long passes with the exception of that one that Duggan was able to hit in the first quarter, but they've just been absolutely squeezing the life out of TCU in those underneath patterns. No one's been breaking free. The amount of times where Duggan's patted the ball 2 or 3 times and just sat in the pocket and no one's getting open for him, I think that really bodes poorly for them to come back and to win in this game, because what Georgia's doing, they're putting that big umbrella over it, closing down the big plays through the air and forcing them to go, 5 and 6 yards at a time. And that's when these hard hits are just taking their toll on TCU. So unfortunately, I think, Cinderella has reached midnight at this point, and they've turned back into a pumpkin to a certain degree. A lot of people probably happy about that, having been burned all season by TCU and their fortunate streak of playing backup quarterbacks and winning close games. But it is a bit of a downer here in the national title game to see them get exposed to this degree, at least on offense. On defense, you figured that Stetson Bennett would turn it on maybe in the second half, but clearly he came out with his hair on fire in this game. And I really do like what they've done in terms of kind of taking some plays out of the TCU playbook, which you saw that on the last Bennett touchdown run, essentially getting the ball for him and doing a sweep to the left. They've allowed him to show off his athleticism, and the numbers game and the running game is working out for Georgia when he's pulling it down. So the only question to me at this point, obviously TCU is out of this in terms of winning outright. Obviously, the point spread is going to be live. We'll get into that. But also the original total, which danced between 61.5 and 64, that's going to come into play in terms of preference on Kirby Smart's part. Does he keep running the offense as is, peppering in plenty of play action passes, or do they go in the shell in the second half and just try to go into a 4-minute offense? That, I think, is going to be a little bit more difficult to say, because really it's just a preference at this point because TCU seems powerless to stop them.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. So that was a big issue for me coming into this, and I wrote this up. One thing I was looking for in this game is I was looking to play a live under, which I have already played at under 69.5. The thing is that these two teams actually, from a plays per second standpoint, actually play pretty slow. Like TCU was 88th nationally in that. Georgia was 116th. Now we're getting into the scenario where what game kept coming back to me, Mike, is obviously the last 2 games with Georgia. We've had the game against LSU and the game against Ohio State where Georgia has not looked good defensively at all. They've allowed like 7.4 yards per play in those 2 games, but the 12 games before that, they only allowed 4.3 yards per play. So I was wondering, which Georgia were we going to see? We're going to see the Georgia that just gives up a ton of explosive passing plays, the Georgia team that can't get home like they were against CJ Stroud. But it seems like we're getting the Georgia team that dominated the game against Tennessee. And that's the game that just kept coming back to me, where we have this high-powered offense with a quarterback that's very mobile. And Georgia has just been able to get after Max Duggan. I mean, he's now at negative 10 rushing yards. He's been sacked a few times, and he does not look comfortable in the pocket. And if you take away the one blown coverage play, TCU has 60 yards on 20 plays. That's 4 yards per play. That is not going to bode well going forward. So now we get into a second half where Georgia doesn't have to do all these explosive passing plays, where they can just sit and run the ball. And TCU actually has done a pretty good job of stopping the Georgia running backs. Obviously, Stetson Bennett has gotten outside the pocket and has been very, very mobile. But we're going to get into a situation where Georgia, who just scored a touchdown, so they are going to go up 30-7 here. So we're going to have that be at 38 points. Georgia gets the ball at halftime. So if they're just going to sit on this, and like you said, if they continue to just light it up in the air and go through all these explosive passes, but everything I've seen from Georgia this season, once they get ahead, they just sit on it. They just run the ball over and over again. It's exactly what they're going to do here. They're just going to squeeze the life out of this. And again, like I already mentioned, they are incredibly slow from a seconds per play standpoint. I mean, they're sitting at just a little over 28 seconds per play. So I'm very inclined to play a live under here. I'd wait until it gets to halftime, and we got a minute 19 here, and TCU's got 2 timeouts. Give TCU a chance to run some offense. Maybe they score one more time, and you can get a better number under on live. But that's where I'm looking right now, is potentially a live under. I don't really have any interest in the spread right now, which is sitting at Georgia minus 31.5 going into halftime. The live over under is sitting at 67.5 at bet365. So that's where I'm going with it. It just kind of sucks. But, Cinderella came into this, they obviously the pregame package is always so great whenever you have an underdog like this. And can they shock the world? And it looks like they are not going to shock the world. And I have a very, very hard time seeing how they are going to move the ball. We were kind of talking before. I was a little disappointed they didn't go for it on that 1 4th down. About 4th and 6, it was from around Georgia's 45, I believe, or somewhere close to there. And they ended up punting that. I mean, it's just looked way too easy for Georgia on offense right now. I mean, they're sitting, they were at over 11 yards per play at halftime. We're sitting at over 300 yards of offense right now. So it has been very, very easy for them offensively. But again, as we get into the second half, if I know Kirby Smart, like I think I do, I think they're going to just sit on this and run the ball repeatedly. And again, TCU has done a pretty good job. So that's where I'm looking at a live under here. Georgia's about to kick off. We'll see how aggressive. I mean, TCU has to be aggressive now. But again, if Duggan has to take shots down the field, like we've already seen when they've been way down, he already overthrew Quentin Johnson once and threw an interception. So, it is tough to get involved with Cinderella right now. I don't know if there is a number where I would actually feel comfortable getting involved with TCU. Maybe if the backups come in, who knows? But that's where I'm looking. Any other thoughts here as we close in here on the first half? Did you have any pre-game plays from either player props or an actual total spread that you may be looking to hedge, or maybe looking to middle, I guess?
So I did have first touchdown Brock Bowers, which I was enthused with how much they were involving him on that first drive, but obviously I don't end up getting a touchdown there. I also had over, 62.5 was my number. As we discussed here at length, I think that's in question. It's going to depend on that third quarter. I'm going to need TCU to probably get a stop on that first drive and then go down and score just to keep Georgia interested, so they're running their full offense. What I do think is interesting is, yes, Georgia can go into a shell in the third quarter, but at least the offense is modern enough that could mean bubble screens to McConkey. It could mean, getting Bowers involved in the running game, or, some quick pop passes. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go 85-15 on the run pass ratio. What are your thoughts on the 3-headed backfield for Georgia potentially grabbing one of them for an anytime touchdown score in the second half? I know that they like to mix it up and kind of play the hot hand, but you saw that rushing touchdown there at the end of the half. Is there any one of those backs that you would favor over another?
I mean, just looking at it right now, I mean, Kendall Milton's got the most carries right now. He's got 8 carries. McIntosh is at 5 and Edwards is at 3. Obviously they went to Kendall Milton there in a short yardage situation. If any of them, I maybe would go Milton again, just because seems like he's getting most of the carries, even though he's only averaging 3.1 yards per carry. I mean, McIntosh is the explosive back, the one that they like to use to get out in space. Edwards is obviously one of their more backs they like to use in pass coverage or passing in the passing game. So if I had to, it seems like they're going to go Milton here. But again, it would probably be Milton or McIntosh, because again, it seems like they just like to use Edwards in those passing type situations. So if I had to play anybody, it would be Milton. But again, this is one of those situations. It's very, very hard to get in on a handicap, right, in a blowout. Basically, the only situations that I like to do when I live bet is I love to look at, essentially where are we at in the game state, what was obviously the pregame line, and then Max Duggan just got picked off again on 3rd and 18. So now Georgia can potentially go in and score again and then get the ball at halftime. And this one is going to be way out of hand. So this gets a little interesting, Mike, because now that Georgia gets the ball at half, if you're somebody who didn't get involved on a live under, I would wait and to see what happens here, close out the first half, and then wait until after Georgia's first drive. If they're able to just go down and score again, and they're up, so that would put them up almost, that would put them up 38 points. That would be the live under situation right there to jump in. But yeah, this is getting really bad for Cinderella. This is I don't know what else to say. This is bad. But yeah, so if I were to, now that I'm seeing what's happening right now, we'll see if Georgia actually is aggressive and takes a couple shots right before the half here. Let's just watch this play out here really quick before we do any other type of analysis.
Just a quick question for you. I know that Chandler Morris was lost early in the season. Does that put Sam Jackson as their backup quarterback for the second half?
I don't know. I think you just leave Duggan in there and just hope
just in terms of having watched, TCU in a lot of blowouts this year, particularly early in the season, Jackson's a great running option. So if he does come in, if you want to just make a drive interesting and look for TCU to potentially move the ball on some broken plays, that could be some value. But I agree with you. At this point, we're basically in the 96 Fiesta Bowl, Nebraska, Florida territory where one team is just getting fed into the wood chipper. So
and
you can't really, be too hard on these guys to potentially throw up the white flag at this point. So I agree. I think it's difficult to get in with any level of confidence on a play that's really longer than a drive, quarter max. I do think I'll look at maybe the total for the third quarter and consider that. But anything going into the fourth quarter of a game that could be a 38, 45 point lead, that really gets to almost a CYO football running clock situation.
Right. And Georgia just scored a touchdown as well. So now it's 38-7, 31 point lead. So again, Georgia gets the ball at halftime. So I'm going to be and we'll stay with everybody through halftime and into a little bit of the third quarter as well. But yeah, the only thing that I'm looking at right now is that live under, because once Georgia scores again, as we've seen, it's been a big time struggle for TCU. They just cannot move the ball outside of just that one broken coverage play. So, and I don't think since it's the national title, I don't think Georgia's taken the handbrake or putting on the handbrake defensively. So I think they're going to keep coming after Duggan since it is the final game of the year. But 26 seconds left here in the first half. Extra point is good. 38-7 Georgia. Again, it's been quite a bloodbath so far. And again, the problem is that, and this is another thing that I had issues with TCU coming in, is their defense, as Colin wrote up, like they're really good at havoc, like they're really good at forcing turnovers, as you saw against Michigan. But something with live betting, and this is just live betting football in general for me, is okay, what happens when you don't get those turnovers? Okay, what happens when you don't get 2 pick sixes and a fumble at the goal line? What happens if you don't stop Michigan at the goal line in the first drive of the game? It changes the entire outcome of the game. So now you're seeing a situation where TCU is not getting a turnover. They're not getting those big time explosive plays, which they basically live on, because they're a top 5 explosive team or top 10 explosive team in the country, but they were 49th in success rate. So, and Georgia obviously, is top 10 in pretty much every single defensive category, including EPA per play, top 10 in EPA per pass allowed as well. So that's the struggle here for TCU, is if you can't get those explosive plays and you're not that good of a success rate team to begin with, and you're not getting turnovers, it's very, very, very hard for you to actually move the ball. So they're going to come out to about the 25-yard line here. We'll see. They have 2 timeouts, 21 seconds left. We'll see if they decide if they actually want to try and maybe try to throw a couple explosive passes, but Duggan has been picked off, I believe, on his last, it's 2 drives in a row he's been picked off, right? Or it's been 3 drives. Either way, it's still bad. So we'll see here. We'll hope maybe we'll let the rest of the crowd join us here right before halftime. Again, Georgia 38-7, 21 seconds left. We got a player down here. So, and that just kind of puts a wrap on. It almost kind of puts a wrap on this college football season. Like for me, I don't know about you, it's been a kind of a weird college football season, in the fact that not only we have Cinderella here in the Final Four and going forward, but they're just outside of Georgia. just never felt like there was a completely dominant team, or there was never a game where I was just like, okay, we have two, other than obviously the Ohio State Michigan game, where that was like, okay, we have two completely dominant powerhouses going forward. And it just kind of felt like nobody really was, maybe Michigan up to a certain extent, but it just felt like for most of the season, just really wasn't a team that was up to par with Georgia. And I think we're kind of seeing that through here at the college football play. Did you feel that way as well? Did you think that anybody was up near par with Georgia, or did you think that, I guess, throughout the season, were they in a class of their own?
It's kind of strange to say this in modern college football with, the proliferation of the spread and offenses in general. You can't be viewed as a national title caliber team and program without one of those offenses. But I always kind of take the idea that great defenses travel. You got to win 2 games on neutral sites to end the year against elite competition. So throughout the year, I'm looking for that team that at least has like a top 15, top 20 defense. And what's interesting, Georgia clearly showed that their pass defense could be taken advantage of. LSU throwing for over 500 yards in the NCC title game. And then Ohio State taking advantage fully. And I still believe if Marvin Harrison doesn't get hurt, that they end up winning that game.
I agree.
So it's just interesting for a year that Georgia clearly got more out of their offense in the big games as the season went on. To me, they were, a half step, maybe a full step behind the previous team, because that defense was so magnificent that it made it almost impossible. You had to play a perfect game and have your full deck. Alabama was able to beat them once, but as soon as Williams went down, they just didn't have the perimeter weapons to take advantage of them last year. That's how I felt about this season, where it's like all the elite teams, nobody was really striking fear into me defensively. I had some hopes halfway through the season that, Jim Knowles had done it with the Ohio State defense, but clearly they're not quite there. I just think we're kind of in this weird era still in college football where very few teams have cracked the code, even with 5-star players at all 3 levels of the defense. A lot of defenses are still hanging their hat on, forget about total yards, forget about third down defense. Let's just get 2 or 3 turnovers a game, and then we can be considered a really good defense. It's strange to me that that's the era that we're in. And I also think to a certain degree, and Georgia clearly made the right decision by opening up the offense a little bit and allowing Bennett to cook more often. But it's interesting to me that some of these top teams that have the potential to have a great defense haven't tried to make some moves to go a little bit closer to ball control, as opposed to the trend that's going in the opposite direction, which is if you have better players in the perimeter, get more plays, get into the 70s, 80s plays per game, and it's going to go in your favor in a wash at that point. So just in terms of where college football is at in general, I still think there's value. You saw it a little bit during the COVID year with Coastal, where they ran like their own version of like kind of the pistol triple option. They could have really long drives, and they had a very good defense that year. That was at the G5 level. I'm interested to see a team go back to that at the very top of college football, and it's why it made it difficult for me to fall in love with this Georgia team earlier in the season. And they had some games where clearly it was a situation where they were disinterested against Mizzou, they were disinterested against Georgia Tech. But I think because their defense wasn't quite as elite, that allowed those teams to kind of hang around and almost beat them.
Yeah, we'll welcome in anybody who's joining us here live for the second half. We've been live for a little while, but first, if you're just joining us, this is Bet What Happens Live here on the Action Network's YouTube page and the Action Network Twitter. I am BJ Cunningham, joined by my friend and co-host Mike Calabrese. But first, I got to let you know that Bet What Happens Live is presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey, Colorado, and Ohio. Bet $1, get 200 free. Georgia is up 38-7 here at the half. It has been an absolute bloodbath. Georgia completely dominating that entire first half. Cinderella's luck has run out, and now we're sitting in a situation where this is where people like us take over, trying to make the second half a little more interesting, right? So if we're looking at the live line at Bet365, Georgia is a minus 38.5 favorite, and the over-under is sitting at 71.5. Me and Mike have kind of been talking that it's very difficult to get it on a side here, whether it be TCU or Georgia, given the fact that this is such a big lead for Georgia. We obviously don't know if in the second half, if maybe some backups are going to come in, if Duggan potentially maybe sits down and the backup comes in, who knows? But anyway, for me, I am definitely looking at playing a live under here. Georgia gets the ball at halftime, so I would not play the live under right now. But if Georgia goes out and scores first here as when they get the ball at half, then you're only going to get a better number, which is currently at 72.5. You may be able to get a 75, 76, somewhere in there. Obviously, the pregame total was sitting at 62.5, 63, somewhere in there. So the actual over looks pretty, famous last words, but it looks pretty safe right now. It's been a big time struggle for TCU to move the ball. I mean, I mentioned it before going into half, but I mean, they have 121 yards on 26 plays. Well, if you take away the one busted coverage, that was a 60-yard pass, they're sitting at 61 yards in 25 plays. That's not a good yards per play average. So as we get into the second half coming into this, one thing I was a little irked by with this total, I thought it was maybe a little bit too high, but I thought it was right on. These two teams actually played pretty slow. Like I already mentioned, TCU 88th in seconds per play, Georgia 116th. Georgia has been using the explosive passing game to their advantage. I mean, TCU coming into this was 124th in explosive passing allowed. Now we get into a second half of a blowout. Georgia's not going to be hopefully not going to be just continually throwing the ball down the middle and side of the field for 10, 15, 20 yards in the air. They're probably going to be running the ball a lot more. So I am very, very inclined to play a live under. I've played it midway through the second quarter at under 69.5. I think we're going to get into a situation much like the Georgia-Tennessee game where Georgia had a big time lead and they basically just sat on it and they ran the ball repeatedly in the second half and they ended up winning that game 27-13. It's a struggle here for TCU. I really don't know how they're going to move the ball. Mike, after that first half, kind of summarize your thoughts that we've already kind of been talking about here and anything maybe you're looking at playing here as we get into the second half.
Yeah, unfortunately for TCU, the best thing they've done is run the ball, which is shocking given that Kendry Miller didn't play. DeMarcado has been really good at, yards after contact in the limited sample size he has, but that's not going to get it done. They're not going to run the ball down the field against this Georgia defense. So with that being said, I think even if Georgia just plays the exact same defense, they don't mix it up with exotic looks in the second half, I find it hard to believe that TCU is going to be able to put together more than one touchdown drive in the second half. And there's also the white flag element of this. I'll pose a question back to you, though, quickly. They're down 31. They're kicking off to start the second half. I would put it at 30%, 40% starts with an onside kick. So it could be cake field position for Georgia, which would be not so good for the live under.
Yeah.
Or if they get it, maybe it's a shot in the arm for TCU. They go down and score, and then Georgia goes, okay, we need to reassert our dominance. That would be my biggest concern. Because I do think if that ball goes out the back of the end zone, touchback, you're probably looking at a 9-10 play drive for Georgia, field goal or touchdown to end it, but eat up 6 minutes of the clock. I'm worried about that onside kick because it's just a question of pride, really, for TCU. Because on the coaching card, just like the 2-point card, this is the onside kick situation.
And that's my biggest thing is I want to wait until this first drive happens to see before I actually play that live under. Because again, it has been so easy for Georgia and it's a national title game. So obviously they're going to want to sit on this lead. But then again, since they are up so big, do the first couple drives, do they really come out and try to just seal this thing up? 45-7 is completely insurmountable. So not that it's not insurmountable right now, but again, we're at 9.3 yards per play for Georgia. TCU is sitting at 4.6 yards per play. TCU's turned the ball over 3 times. So, turnovers obviously have a big time factor in totals and obviously these games. If TCU just doesn't turn the ball over 3 times, does Georgia have 38 points? Probably not. They're probably sitting around, is probably maybe a 31, 24 point game. So that's something I'm interested to see here in the second half. If neither team turns the ball over and Georgia just runs the ball repeatedly, I think this is going to be a white flag type situation. This game just eerily reminds me of the Alabama Notre Dame game from I don't know how many years ago. I remember being on Notre Dame plus 17 in that game, and it just ended so poorly for me. So that was the fear coming in here, is that you obviously have Cinderella, and everybody loves to buy into Cinderella, but Georgia's obviously just in a class of their own right now. So again, halftime 38-7 TCU. Let's since this game is kind of out of hand, let's just talk this college football season at large. Is there any bets from, this is something I like to play. I hate to bring up like painful wounds and memories, but is there any game from this bowl season and maybe even the regular season a whole, a bet that you had that was just the most painful loss and the worst beat you had this season?
So earlier in this year, after App State upset A&M,
Yeah, you
and
know what? I remember because I was on Green Dot Daily with you, and I
yeah,
remember you giving out
Troy money line,
Troy
and
Moneyline, who
Troy
ended up
played
winning
a
the
hell
Sun
of a
Belt.
game, and Troy arguably had their best season
Yep.
at least once they jumped up to the FBS level. And they lose on a Hail Mary that made it to the 12-yard line or something, just something ridiculous. And I was
Yeah.
actually hosting like a neighborhood party, and everybody knew that I was on Troy, and no one else at the party was a gambler or really knew anything about football, but a lot of them were walking around congratulating me with a minute to go. And I had
Oh
that
no.
1,000-yard stare of, a veteran gambler where I was like, anything can
Yeah.
happen. So that
Wait.
one hurt, particularly because
Yeah.
Troy was not just the right side in that game, but they were the right team the whole year in the Sun Belt. Um, so that one hurt, but then it also was parlayed into the fact that after the second week of the season, I parlayed Troy to win the Sun Belt and TCU to win the Big 12. And we saw TCU get to the
Oh,
goal line in the title game. That
yeah.
was 180 to 1 parlay.
Oh my gosh,
I
Mike.
was able to
Oh my
shout
gosh.
out to my co-host Mike Ianello, who says that
Oh,
hedging is for cowards. I was able to extract about 30% of
okay.
value out of that bet. But that one absolutely killed me. So the combination of Troy and bad beats will forever be links for me. But yeah, it was just a season where a lot of the upsets, usually I have like FOMO on not calling a particular upset. Like A&M beating or losing to App State didn't make any sense. And as the season went on, it
Yeah.
didn't even really make it that much sense because App State proved to be not all that good. So there was just a lot of moments like that throughout the year. Even Tulane, who's the G5 darling, they lost to Southern Miss. Who, yeah,
Yeah.
sure, they were a bowl team and a winner in their bowl game, but didn't make a whole lot of sense, year over year with what you usually see, which is an upset being a springboard to a bigger story or, some kind of larger narrative. There was just a lot of randomness to this year that I haven't really seen since the COVID year, but I think all of
Yeah.
that was just chalked up to weird travel and roster issues.
Yeah. This season was definitely very weird. And for me, I don't know about you, but I love to play the early markets in college football, Saturday, Sunday nights into Mondays. And the market early on in the season just moved in ways that I have never seen it move towards teams that, whether it be like myself or Colin Wilson, seeing his projections along with the S&P Plus is like what I like to use to figure out where I believe the market is going to move. And I can't tell you how many times it just moved the exact opposite way that I thought it was going to do. And it actually kind of made me pause a lot as we got into the second half of the season of actually playing a lot of early bets because I was like, is this going to move against me, even though I think it's going to go this way? But yeah, the one game that really sticks out to me was from bowl season. It was Lafayette and Houston, where I had Lafayette +7. They were covering the entire game. I was looking at our win probability charts on the Action Network app. It was at 97% for them covering 7 points. It was a tie game. Houston had the ball. All they needed to do was kick a field goal. They would have won the game with 20 seconds left. But Clayton Tune threw the ball, and they made one man miss, and they scored a touchdown to go up 7. And I can't remember where I was during that, but I remember I was looking at it on my phone. I think I was at the grocery store, and I was like, for any Succession fans out there, I was like Roman Roy when he watches the spaceship or this shuttle blow up on his phone at the wedding, and he just tucks his phone right back into his jacket pocket and just walks out of the bathroom. I think that was my reaction to it. Just kind of the season gambler thing, like you already mentioned, of being like, I can't show any facial expressions or get mad like I am at home and just throw something against the wall. I've got to just act like nothing really happened. So yeah, for me, that one stuck out. But yeah, to your point, like there is just so much randomness in this college football season where you think you have a team figured out. And like, a perfect example would be UCLA. Like they were looking so good for a long time there. And then they go and play an Arizona team and Jaden DeLora just torch them and they lose as 20-point favorites. And then they end up losing again in the Sun Bowl to Pittsburgh on a backup quarterback. So yeah, and now we're going to see this season with the transfer portal. One thing I was kind of interested. I was looking back on the season. I was like, okay, this is the second year of this new transfer portal era, right? If you look through the conference champions through the Power Five, it's a lot of continuity. And I think that's something to look out for going forward. So if you look at the Pac-12, it was Cam Rising in Utah. If you look at the Big Ten, it was JJ McCarthy in Michigan, Georgia, Stetson Bennett in the SEC, ACC. It was, obviously DJ was there for a long time with Clemson, but obviously, I'm just blanking on his name right now. Help me out real quick. Clemson's new quarterback. I'm blanking on his name.
Oh, Cade Klubnik.
There we go. Klubnik. Yeah. Our producer, Matt Mitchell, is not happy with him after his bowl performance. But anyway, yeah, he's obviously been in the Clemson system for a long time. So I think that's going to be a trend going forward, is that actually having continuity, whether it be a coach, offensive coordinator, or at least a quarterback from season to season, could potentially give us some value on some of these teams. Now we'll obviously see what the odds are, because you did have quite a few long shots actually win outright. I mean, it was obviously Tulane at 60-1 to win the AAC. We had Kansas State, which I believe was around 18-20-1 preseason to win the Big 12. Michigan was obviously one of the favorites with Ohio State. Clemson was the favorite to win the ACC, and Utah was around 4 or 5-1, somewhere around there, to win the Pac-12. So, I'm not going to get into this like way too early. Who are we looking at next year? Because there's just a ton to sort out here with the transfer portal and everything like that. But I think that's something as we go forward in this new college football era of, the transfer portal era. I think a lot of continuity is going to be very, very big for these schools going forward. Do you have any thoughts on this new era of the transfer portal and maybe what we're thinking about going forward?
I've always been a big proponent of following the coordinators and really doing your homework on what kind of difference schematically, and also, a shot in the arm, whether it's a team going from not really blitzing all that much to being a team that really puts an emphasis on havoc, or a team that is a bit more plodding, going to an up-tempo true style. So for that reason, not only am I looking at the FBS movement and, from the G5 to the Power 5, but also you see it in some of the coaching hires from the FCS level, where they'll pluck whoever's a top 5 coordinator at that level and then plug them in. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You look at Washington State from this past year, there was plenty of steam behind Cam Ward and coming in with his coordinator and this idea that it was going to be a plug and play offense. It didn't work out, but I don't necessarily view that as a total failure from a betting perspective, where it's like, right. I still think there was value on a Washington State team that went to Camp Randall and upset Wisconsin earlier in the season. They had a pretty good defense. If they had been able to put it together on offense, maybe they would have, made a run in the Pac-12. That's what kind of excites me for off-season homework, so to speak. It's really getting into the, not that the transfer portal is not critically important to every single program, but the coaching continuity and the coaching talent, whether it's the talent drain, losing coordinators. I think it's an underrated story of Clemson taking so many steps back in the last 2 years, is that they had the best coaching coordinator continuity and level of talent for years, for 6 and 7 years. And it wasn't coincidental. Dabo, for all of his personality quirks, some people love him, some people hate him, he made a really wise decision very early on where he said, I can take more money for myself. I would prefer to put it in the pool and to pay my guys top dollar right away and to keep them. And for that reason, I think it really had a massive impact on them being able to go from Taj Boyd to Deshaun Watson to Trevor Lawrence and really not missing a beat offensively, because it's the same terminology, it's the same teacher, so, more or less. So those are the things that I kind of target. Although one portal piece of news that I think, has been covered, but I'm a little bit shocked, is that Grayson McCall hasn't moved. And when you look at how good he is and how well he runs a complicated offense, like, honestly, like if it was plug and play and he went to Georgia, it's like, okay, Georgia is my number 1 pick. They're going to win the national title again. There's like 6 or 7 teams that I think are a quarterback away. Apparently there's some kind of transfer academic issue, and maybe that's why he's stuck at Coastal, and maybe he'll end up, declaring for the draft. Who's to say? But I'm surprised that he hasn't been a bigger name, because to be as good as he was day one as a starter, and then to keep that up at a conference player of the year level, albeit in the Sun Belt, I would have figured that would have made him the top target for a lot of these programs. And so many of them have proven that they just don't care about the old ways of doing business. I'd say 90% of the schools would be more than happy to have a plug and play quarterback of his caliber. So, maybe there's still, some chips left to fall here, but if he goes back to Coastal without Jamie Chadwell, that's kind of one of the more head scratchers of the offseason for me.
Yeah, Chadwell obviously going to Liberty, and Hugh Freeze coming down to. Yeah, there's going to be so much coordinator and head coach changes throughout all of college football. I just saw him on the broadcast, and one thing that I'm very interested to see, maybe I'll get your thoughts on this. Obviously, Deion Sanders going to Colorado, bringing in a ton of transfers, obviously from Jackson State and all around the country, 4 and 5-star recruits coming there. I think in the betting market, we're going to see Colorado get overvalued quite a bit just because of the Deion Sanders factor. And obviously, they have a ton of talent. He plucked Candle from Kent State to be his offensive coordinator at Colorado.
Sorry, Sean Lewis.
Yeah. Sean Lewis, my bad.
Yeah.
Sorry, I get Toledo and Kent State mixed up. My bad. Sean Lewis. Yeah, you are correct. Sean Lewis, who obviously is
Sean Lewis, who is a tremendous offensive mind.
He is. Kent State's been one of the best teams in the MAC. And that just reminded me, I was looking through all my bets, and this is completely off topic, but there was a action game that I had a horrible beat. It was Bowling Green, Western Michigan. I had Bowling Green -4.5. They fumbled at the goal line with, I think, like 4 minutes left to go up 14. And then Western Michigan went down and kicked just completely meaningless field goal to lose by 4. But anyway, that was completely off topic. But anyway, yeah, no, as far as Colorado is concerned, I hate to do this, but like, are they going to be near one of the favorites in the Pac-12 to win, to go from 1-11? I mean, I don't think so. I think they're just going to price USC, Oregon, and Utah pretty close. Or wait, USC goes to the Big Ten next year, right? Or the year after, excuse me.
Year after. So
year after next year.
This is the last ride for USC.
This is the last ride. I thought that's what it was, but I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. So last season, obviously, I'm guessing that USC will be the favorites to win the Pac-12, but will Colorado be 4th or 3rd on the odds board behind Utah and
Well, I'll say this. One thing that's interesting, I follow this pretty closely because I schedule a big college football trip for friends and family every year, and I've circled Oregon for this upcoming year because they're hosting USC. And generally, about December 8th, 10th on an annual basis, the Pac-12 they've already had their schedules out for years, but it just says the home and away. So then they go in and they schedule the actual games on the calendar in mid-December. They haven't done that this year, and it's been frustrating to me trying to plan this because I would love to go to Oregon in late September, not so much in November. But the reason why they did it, they came out and they announced it because there was some delays and they weren't making a statement to the media. But the Pac-12 commissioner and some of his junior underlings have basically said they want to wait for the transfer portal to shake out. They want to know exactly how their teams match up, at least in terms of tiers, to be able to say, there's a USC on the top and maybe there's, a Washington State or an Arizona State somewhere in the middle. They want to figure that out before they start scheduling the games. And I think that has a huge impact on a program like Colorado. There's the buy-in preseason. There's the talent influx. There's all of these new bells and whistles with coaching schemes, everything else. If they get a favorable start to the season, not just in their non-con, but also in the Pac-12, then yes, I could see myself buying in for them being priced as the 4th or 5th team to win the Pac-12. But if they have to start early in the season, by playing in the Pac-12 South, if they have to go early on and play USC, UCLA, I don't like that for them because I think that could stall a lot of their positive momentum. And Deion is selling belief. He's selling that it's going to happen right away. So to be able to get to 4-1, 5-1 on the season as opposed to 3-3, I think that means more to a program like Colorado than it necessarily would more of a veteran program like an Oregon State, where Jonathan Smith is like they're grinding their way to the mountaintop. He's not selling any instant, overnight success.
Right.
Primetime is. So I do think it has a big impact how those schedules end up shaking out.
You want to guess who they have in their first game? This is quite fun. I just pulled their schedule and it's actually quite funny.
So they don't open with Colorado State anymore? That's not
they're playing Colorado State 3rd. They're opening up with TCU at TCU, who won't have Max Duggan, obviously, but that's a very, very interesting game to start off. Now, obviously, TCU is going to lose a ton of guys from this national title run, so it's going to be a very, very different TCU team. But again, and then they got to host Nebraska. So with new Matt Rule, but obviously as an Iowa fan, I don't think Nebraska's going to have any success And then obviously they, like you mentioned, the dates are to be determined for the USC Oregon stuff in the Pac-12. But we're just starting the second half here. If you're somebody who maybe has just joined us in the last 5 or 10 minutes and just have been listening to us ramble and is like, I thought this was a betting halftime show. It's a blowout here between Georgia and TCU. Both me and Mike don't really have any interest in getting in on either side here, with Georgia sitting at around a -38 favorite on the live line. Georgia's obviously receiving the kickoff here. I've already played a live under at under 69.5 midway through the second quarter, and then Max Duggan decided to throw 2 interceptions and Georgia scored early twice. But I would still look at playing a live under here, but I'm going to wait until this. Let's see if they onside kick this first.
Yeah, the onside kick element is going to tell you a lot.
And they just threw it. They just kicked it deep.
All right. Maybe it's white flag time. Maybe that
it might be white
live.
Flag time here. Yeah, we'll stick through you here through the end of this first drive with Georgia. Give our final thoughts here as this first drive happens. But yeah, once Georgia either scores or gives the ball back to TCU, we'll sign off here and allow everybody to enjoy the final 30 minutes of the college football season before we say sayonara until week 0 in August. I hate how long the college football offseason is. I don't know about you, when it's June and July, I'm just so itching for college football. I'm watching F1 races, maybe betting some tennis, or betting the Pirates at like plus 250. But I'm just like, I wanted week 0 to get here so bad. All right, Georgia runs it on the first play. It looks like that was McIntosh.
I do think it's nice in terms of the long off season that the build up to week 0, the appetizer week, the games are always objectively not good, but I am thrilled for college football to be back. I probably do more homework on week 0 than I do for any other week of the regular season. So the fact that I get to throw that into New Mexico State and Hawaii and all these other teams, I think it's great. The off season I think could benefit maybe starting 1 week earlier in August. But yeah, I'm with you. The fact that baseball season goes on seemingly forever. That's why when they start with hot stove talk, as soon as the regular season or the postseason's over in baseball, I'm like, you need to wait your turn, because we've been through the gambling winter many times waiting for college football to come back.
Exactly. Yeah. Once we get into that point, I'm just like, I just really just want college football. I'm just kind of, again, I'm just really tired of betting on these huge underdogs in baseball, or, at that point, Wimbledon has just ended. Now we're, obviously betting the PGA Tour in the dog days of July. But yeah, it's this next season. I mean, we say it every college football season where it's just like, man, this is going to be so interesting. All right. Well, it looks like Georgia's about to punt here. Mike, you want to give us any of your final thoughts here on the national title game? Maybe anything you're potentially looking at here as Georgia punts the ball away against to give TCU the ball back here in the second half?
Yeah, I think if you have an opportunity for a live number on one more interception for Max Duggan, this is clearly force it time. Try to play hero ball. It's something he's already done throughout the entire season, really taking the whole offense on his back in the second half. But the last part that I want to, impart on people, in case you missed it earlier, if Sam Jackson gets in at quarterback for TCU, he's got incredible wheels. So on a single drive basis, if you see him come in, he could potentially spark a touchdown drive for TCU, particularly if they're just giving him a shot in garbage time. So someone to keep an eye on if he makes it into this game.
Yeah. So yeah, as far as a live under is concerned, I'm gonna probably just continue to wait. Maybe I can get at this point, I already have a live play on under 69.5. I'm just gonna be looking to play that back. Maybe if we get a white flag situation here in the second half. But again, so that'll do it here for Bet What Happens Live, which again is presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey and Colorado and Ohio. Bet $1 in any game, get $200 free. For Mike Calabrese, I'm BJ Cunningham. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Enjoy the final 30 minutes of the college football season.